So now let's hope that the recording will be stable. It's the old laptop, and the new models somehow are not stable, cannot communicate with old devices, but if this functions correctly, we are glad. So let's look at what we can do here. We were quite far down the line here. That's what I have told you something about this role of a smart home in such an energy system. I have shown you that we should look at integrated grids, not just at the power grid, but also at the gas grid and the heat grid, because they can be or should be connected. They are connected, they can be connected, and they provide a lot more flexibility. In particular, the gas network has a lot of flexibility because it can function as some kind of storage. And then we saw that we need these integrated energy management systems. There's the need for load flexibility and load shifting, and we looked at what kind of information actually is necessary, what kind of communication is necessary. We looked at typical questions last time, and then I summarized that with the tasks that we need actually from informatics point of view to support the energy system. It's quite a long list of tasks that have to do with ICT, with computer science or informatics, and in order to be able to provide these tasks or to carry out those tasks, you need competences in informatics. Now I know that quite a few of you are not experts in computer science or in informatics, but it just should show that if you want to really have valid or valuable tools in the energy system, you need experts from the informatics area, and those experts from the informatics area actually should acquire competences in the energy system in order to be able to support that in a reasonable way. Now we get to the first new slide of today, with half an hour delay because of these problems with technology. What's this? A new update. Don't want to have this update. Okay, so the evolution of the grid. People talk about the Internet of Energy. Now, why do they talk about the Internet of Energy? We have an Internet of Data. So, first of all, what do we have as the traditional grid? We have generation, we have generation, we have transfer, we have consumption. Actually, we have transmission and distribution and consumption, as you know. And this is no longer just a process chain, but it is now all interconnected. So generation and consumption can be connected by some kind of communication. Generation and transfer and storage. Storage was not there before because nobody talked about storage in the old system. It was just not present. If you talk about energy management, power system, power grid, storage is not a component that is relevant. And we know, meanwhile, that in order to cope with fluctuations and things like that, we need storage. So this is a very important new part of that system. And it needs the real-time cross-linking of all grid components and participants combined with an intelligent self-organization. That's essentially what we have to do, although it's just a very superficial statement. And now still, why do we talk about the Internet of Energy? We should remember what actually the essential parts of the Internet of Data actually are. How do we characterize the Internet of Data? There is a definition by the IETF from some time in the end of the 80s. The Internet has three major properties. One of the first properties is that there's a global addressing scheme. That means when we look at all the components that we have in our Internet, in the structure that is connected by an Internet, every device, every location has an address. And there is a global addressing scheme. It's IP-based, Internet protocol-based, for uniquely addressing all the components. So the first requirement is, when we talk about an Internet of Energy, every component in the Internet, or in the energy system, should be addressable by some standard addressing format. And then those components should communicate, as is indicated here also. They all want to communicate. In order to communicate, you need a protocol. You need a way to do that in a systematic way, in a defined way, in a standard way. And the standard way of communicating in the internet is to use TCP/IP, the transmission control protocol, and the internet protocol, the combination of those two, and related protocols that are essential additions to the TCP/IP protocols. Now we know how to communicate between uniquely addressable components. And then there are standard services. Yeah, there are standard services in the Internet of Data, like remote method invocation of file transfer, remote login, echo, hello systems, or we have HTTP protocol, and also we have email services and things like that. Now we talk about standard services for an Internet of Energy. And so what are the standard services for operating the energy grid? Like normally we have standard services for operating the data grid. Now we talk about an Internet of Energy. We know how to address the components. We know how to communicate between the components. But what are actually those basic services? And this is an interesting question. Look it up in the literature. You will find very few who actually look at that analogy between Internet of Data and Internet of Energy, because most of them say, oh, we can use our normal ways of communication, and so it isn't Internet. They don't look at the definition, what it actually means. And an important part is that in the Internet of Data, all we do there is based on a standard set of services that we can use in a standard way. We all use the same jointly defined services, and then we can operate the Internet of Data. And so it would be interesting to have standard services for operating the energy grid. And these services certainly will also relate to the standard services we have in the Internet of Data, like sending an echo to another node to see whether they are alive, having the hello function. We don't have to send emails there. That's not necessary. But maybe you have file transfer and things like that. So certain protocols will be necessary there, others maybe not, and there may be new standard services that are relevant for the Internet of Energy. For example, reading out smart metering data. Can that be a standard service? Or just checking the current power status of some device could be a standard service. And this is the type of things people have to look at if they talk about an Internet of Energy. This is actually something which is not done appropriately in most of the literature on when they talk about Internet of Energy. They just talk about, oh, it's all these nice components which are connected by the Internet of Data. And one should do more. One should look into these ways of defining standard services for that. Okay, so, and this is based on the standard IETF, like that's the Internet Engineering Task Force definition of the Internet. So when you that's why Internet, like Internet is a name, and it's defined. The notion of Internet is defined in this very broad way. Certainly, we know that there are all kinds of protocols, thousands of different standards that have been defined for the Internet, but the essential parts are put together or characterized by these three things. Okay, so it took me very long this time to come to this final slide of the introductory motivating chapter. So I will address the challenges that are there for doing something in an intelligent way on the energy system. So I will cover some of the many challenges, opportunities for designing and operating tomorrow's energy system. Today's energy system can run almost without any ICT, without any information processing. There's some information processing on the highest level on the transmission grid because they want to exchange information, but most of the grid can run without any communication. It's a very intelligently designed system because they don't need to communicate to provide essential functions for having a stable grid. This is a very ingenious design, and actually one should not do anything different from that unless it is unavoidable. And this shift to the new energy sources, to renewable energy sources, with these problems of fluctuation, uncertainty, and decentralization are developments which just make it impossible to maintain the old structure. Okay, so what we need is, to some extent, informatics. We certainly will continue to need power engineering. We will also need control engineering. We need communication engineering, appropriate way of communication. We also need expertise in law, in regulation, like regulatory rules and so on, how actually we are constrained by the law to do something in this critical infrastructure. Because it is a critical infrastructure, it is highly regulated. And whatever we do has to be in compliance with those rules. And there are some rules which are, or most of the rules are based on the classical system. So it is not a surprise to see that there are quite a few new developments which actually violate current regulations, and so regulations have to be reformulated, have to be adapted to the new technologies. This is a difficult process. At KIT we are lucky to have people from those different areas, and so we are quite well equipped with experts from like to cooperate on these new topics. Okay. And one point is just clear: without significant contributions from informatics, this transformation will not be feasible. It will not work. So without computer science, it doesn't work. Without informatics, we cannot have such a new system. It will not work reliably. I would never say that informatics can solve all the problems. Definitely not. We need a combination of all these people, of all these disciplines. But without informatics, it doesn't work. Without power engineering, it doesn't work. Yeah, so this is a typically transdisciplinary challenge that we have to address. Now, I wouldn't, like we are quite behind in time. I have here, I just briefly want to show you these animations that I have on this slide here. Who of you has looked at that already? None of you. The links are on the power. What's this? Huh? No. This is ridiculous. Last time I could use that without putting in a name, and this is ridiculous. Ah, I don't need it. You see, this is similar to the old Microsoft operating system, where they provided you with they claimed to have some protection, user protection, that you had to enter username and password, but you could just click that away and then enter the system. Yeah, so it seems to be the same here with this animation. Okay, so what is this about? This is an animation which is
climate change, the growing demand for energy, and the increasing scarcity of fossil fuels present us with great challenges. They demand new ways of thinking and new solutions that will deliver a secure, affordable, and environment-friendly supply of energy. This is the world of e-energy, smart grids made in Germany.
I will stop that. So it would take too long. It's a nice animation which was developed in the e-energy funding program, and to just go to that website, look it up yourself, and you can play around with that, looking at like different types of weather, for example. So in different settings you can have here. You can use different things. You can have rain. You can have night, and you see different ways how this is actually operating. You can have different types of equipment in there. Now this is not working. I don't know why. That should also be clickable. Then you have here some other facilities. Go back today and standards. tomorrow. So you have all kinds of equipment. Before you didn't see an electric vehicle here, and so in these animation components are just consecutively added to show how the system actually will develop into a new energy system. So just look it up. It's a nice animation, and you can play around with that. Actually done in English. And then we have this animation. And this is in German, but nevertheless I will show it to you.
Smart Grids. Was sind sie und wofür brauchen wir sie? Smart Grids bedeutet intelligente Stromnetze. Doch warum soll der Strom intelligent sein? Reicht es nicht, wenn er aus der Steckdose kommt? 2011 wurde die Energiewende beschlossen. Deutschland schaltet immer mehr Kernkraftwerke ab und nutzt zunehmend erneuerbare Energiequellen. Wenn aber kein Wind weht oder die Sonne nicht scheint, produzieren diese Kraftwerke keinen Strom. Das Netz selbst kann für solche Zeiten nichts speichern. Deshalb muss es so umgebaut werden, dass es auch bei windstillen, schattigen Tagen genug Elektrizität gibt. Was hat das Netz damit zu tun und wie funktioniert es überhaupt? Das Netz teilt sich in Transportnetze, die den Strom über große Leitungen transportieren, und in Verteilnetze. Sie leiten den Strom vor Ort bis zum Verbraucher weiter und bilden den überwiegenden Teil des Netzes. Die lokalen Netzbetreiber achten bisher nur darauf, dass jederzeit genug Strom in konstanter Spannung vorhanden ist. In Zukunft könnte es aber sein, dass die Versorgung bei starker Nachfrage manchmal ausfallen muss. Um das zu verhindern, brauchen wir ein intelligentes Netz. Wie funktioniert das? Zunächst sammelt man Daten, wie viel Strom erzeugt und verbraucht wird. Wer benötigt wann Elektrizität und speist wie viel in das Netz ein. Kurz gesagt, wann fließt wie viel Strom in welche Richtung. Denn im lokalen Verteilnetz kann in Zukunft der Strom, eher als schon heute, in zwei Richtungen fließen. Häuser mit Photovoltaikanlagen, Elektroautos und Fabriken mit Blockheizkraftwerk werden künftig auch Strom ins Netz einspeisen und damit auch zu Erzeugern. Mithilfe von Informations- und Kommunikationstechnologie errechnen intelligente Netze, wie man Stromverbrauch und Erzeugung jederzeit optimal regelt, selbst wenn kein Wind weht. Dies funktioniert zum Beispiel bei Smart Homes. Sie können durch Brennstoffzellen, Vorladespeicher und Photovoltaikanlagen Strom sowohl verbrauchen, erzeugen als auch speichern. Smart Grids informieren das Haus, wann es am besten Strom speichert. Zum Beispiel nachts, wenn viel Strom im Netz vorhanden ist. Dagegen speist das intelligente Haus tagsüber, wenn viel Energie gebraucht wird, selbst erzeugten Strom ins Netz ein. So reagiert es smart auf Angebot und Nachfrage. Gleichzeitig hat der Verbraucher weiterhin rund um die Uhr Strom zur Verfügung. Auch Großverbraucher, zum Beispiel mit Blockheizkraftwerken, können Stromverbrauch und Erzeugung smart regulieren. Intelligente Verteilnetze helfen, Energie sinnvoll zu nutzen, sodass es immer genug bezahlbaren Strom gibt, trotz schwankender Ressourcen. Das sichert Arbeitsplätze und Wohlstand in Deutschland. Und was ändert sich am Transportnetz? In Zukunft muss viel mehr Strom über größere Entfernungen transportiert werden. Die Leitungen im Transportnetz müssen daher dicker und zahlreicher werden, damit mehr Strom fließen kann, übrigens wie im Verteilnetz. Was heißt das also für die Zukunft? Die Netze sollten leistungsfähiger und besonders das Verteilnetz intelligenter werden. Manches davon kann man jetzt schon in den E-Energy-Modellregionen sehen. Leider sind aber noch einige Fragen offen. Was kosten Aus- und Umbau der Netze und wer bezahlt sie? Welche Entscheidungen trifft der Markt und was reguliert die Politik? Wie schützen wir sensible Verbraucherdaten und wahren Persönlichkeitsrechte? Wie gewinnen wir Verständnis für den Ausbau der Netze? Wie schützen wir das System vor Angriffen? Wie gestaltet sich die Zusammenarbeit mit anderen Ländern? Wie garantieren wir die zuverlässige Energieversorgung? Spannende Fragen. Akatech hat eine Reihe von Empfehlungen ausgearbeitet. Dazu
Okay, I think that's sufficient. So this is a nice, I think quite nice animation because it shows in a very simple way the major challenges that are there, and that we will actually cover in more detail in the next chapters of this course. Okay, so that's like you can also download that from the URL that is also given there on the slide in a very small font, but you can just click on it in the PDF and then get that. Okay, so that is what I wanted to tell you as a motivation why we actually talk about like the role of ICT in the new energy system, and I would like to go now into details of the energy system. Oops, no, I have to go to this here. Details of the energy system, and I would like to start with something which those of you who have a background in electrical engineering will know. Those who have a background in business engineering or informatics don't know really that much. So very briefly, let's look at fundamentals of energy distribution, logical structure of the power grid, how it looks like currently, and actually how we can stabilize that, what kind of system services we need there. I will briefly tell you something about market structures, very briefly really, and just giving very few ideas about that. And that's more or less the content of this chapter. So the energy system has to do with energy conversion. We have certain primary energy carriers, raw sources, coal, natural gas, oil, biomass, and so on. We have solar radiation, we have wind, and we can try to get energy from, or to transform energy from primary energy carriers into secondary energy carriers. So secondary energy carriers are, for example, gasoline, fuels, electric power, hydrogen, and then we have the end energy, the energy provided to the end user. And the end energy, for example, is, examples, yes, consumable energy, heat, light, mechanical work. That's the energy we actually consume then in when we are driving, when we are living in a room, having lights on here. So this is this energy conversion. We have primary energy carriers. Oops, sorry, I have to go to the pen again. Primary energy carriers, and then the secondary energy carriers, end energy, and energy consumption. And the new situation is that, well, still we have some kind of transport in between, but the transport is simpler than before. Here, like in the new situation where we talk about renewable energies, we don't have power or exploration and mining of primary energy carriers, but we perform power harvesting. Yeah, harvesting the radiation, harvesting from the wind, and so on. Okay, now we'll give you several slides on typical consumption statistics and some other statistics of the energy system. Some based on the year 2012, some on newer data. I did not really update all the slides because essentially it did not change that much. So the sector energy consumption, different sectors of the country. We have 30% energy consumption by the industry. Households 25%, traffic 29%. Yeah, about that. That's just all the energy that is consumed, distributed in that way. Then we have enterprises, trade, services, 16%. This sectoral energy distribution shown over the years is showing some variations, but not very much. Like retail services always was a rather small part. Like here, what you see here is in million tons of coal. So the amount for retail and services is going down. Households, there the consumption increased for some time, then it reduced. Now it is somewhere here. I don't know where it is now. It will develop in similar ways. And traffic and industry are, although at similar levels over the years, so not that many changes really. What about the energy end use here in 2012? Also that does not change that much. We have lighting, we have heating. Heating actually, you see 29% of the energy end use is for heating. Now people talk about reducing significantly the need for heat in buildings. This could be reduced almost to zero, or could be at least be reduced significantly to much lower levels. But you have to invest in that, and you need energy to actually get all the insulation material and so on. But the heating demand will go down. Then we have hot water, we have other thermal processes, we have mechanical energy, like for driving, for example, and also forms of mechanical energy that are needed. And this, then the question is, how did the primary energy consumption develop in Germany from the different sources? So we have mineral oil, we have coal, we have brown coal, which is lignite, we have gas, we have nuclear power. So nuclear, for example, that was here in, up there. That is nuclear, up there, over the years. And here in 2011, it dropped down. And it will be phased out quite soon. And then we have other, we have wind, we have other renewables. So that's just on the top here. So if you look at the complete energy consumption that we have renewables so far, that's for 2013, the latest figure I had in this diagram, it's not very much. It's more if we look to, this is again primary energy consumption shown in a slightly different way in 2013. So here we had 11.8% renewables. And then a certain distribution among all those renewables. So that's all kinds of things. I don't want to go into the details here. It's just showing that renewables have some share, but we are quite significantly depending on mineral oil, gas, coal, lignite, and in 2013 still 7.6% nuclear power. If we look at electricity generation, there, over the years, we have different sources of energy for generating electricity. So lignite, for example, up there used to be very much, and it went down, and what you can see here, it's increasing again because we have fewer power generation from nuclear. Nuclear is this line here. Nuclear is going down significantly. We know why. And so in the same way as nuclear power generation went down, lignite, brown coal went up. So currently we are generating more carbon dioxide, more greenhouse gas than we did before. This is a very bad development. We should try to phase out lignite, but there are quite a few political obstacles, political attempts to save labor forces and things like that. All kinds of interests are in there. We have coal, which is more or less stable. And then we have here we have like gas is more or less stable, going down a little bit. We had some fuel, not that important. Biomass, renewable waste was not important, and certainly now it's quite important. Water, wind, and photovoltaics are really important meanwhile. And we know all that, and it's becoming even ever more important. So again, in 2013, we had 23.4% power generation, electricity generation from renewables, the remainder from lignite, from coal, from nuclear power, and so this part here has to be replaced completely with other sources, with renewables, for example, and and in the renewable part we have wind, biomass, photovoltaics, water, and some other parts. In 2014, this increased to 27.8%. In 2015, it was around 30%. Yeah, so this is or has been increasing quite a bit, and so that's the current situation there. What are the resulting effects on power exchange with neighboring countries? This is also an interesting point. To what extent do we actually import and export power? And you see we are exporting quite a bit of power. So and you see it is increasing. From 2011, when we started the energy transition, the amount of power that we export is increasing. The amount of power that we are importing is decreasing. And it means that the surplus we have is increasing significantly. We have quite a surplus of power, and this will develop in the same way in the next years. So it means that there is quite a surplus. We are installing a large capacity of wind power plants, photovoltaics, other renewables, and we have to do that because we have to supply our system, our power system, with sufficient power at all times. There are many times where we have not that much wind, not that much sunshine, and for those times we also must have sufficient power generation, and so we have an overcapacity and we have an oversupply of power. Just maybe I have it a little bit later, but like on last Sunday, we had 86% of the electrical power consumption was covered by renewables, by photovoltaic and wind. It means only 14% by the conventional power plants, which have to run through. And so the prices on the intraday market went down to minus €100 per megawatt. So that means that you were paid significantly for consuming power, because there's so much power, was such a surplus that we had to get rid of it. And all the connections to the neighboring countries were glowing because all the power had to be transported into the neighboring countries, and not all of them can actually take that. So this is an interesting effect, that there are quite a few days where we really have a huge surplus of power generation. Okay, I will come back to that when we talk about markets and the situation in different countries. So, how do we actually generate energy or generate electricity? We have heating plants for converting primary energy carriers into electricity. There we transform the primary energy into heat, which is stored in steam or water, and then from there turbines are driven, which generate the electricity. So we have power plants where the primary energy input is converted into electric power, and we have combined heat and power plants where we generate heat and power. These are the most efficient because if you generate electricity, you also generate heat. And if you don't use it for heating, that's waste of energy. And like if you just generate heat, you could generate electricity at the same time. If you don't do that, you lose efficiency. So these are the most efficient devices, combined heat and power plants, which are available at many different sizes, traditionally at large sizes, several megawatt, of electricity and of like power generation, but you can also get them in very small versions that are appropriate for buildings. And I would like to briefly tell you something about conventional power plants. So what are conventional power plants? Those that are based on fossil fuels, coal, natural gas, uranium, are conventional power plants. And usually you generate steam, convert chemical energy into steam. Steam is driving the turbines, that's converting into mechanical power, and then the generator connected to the turbine generates the electricity. So this is used for base load and medium load, terms that are characteristic of the traditional energy system. We'll come back to that in a moment. And then there are gas turbine power plants where you are compressing and heating air, and this air drives the turbine, and then it generates electricity. So that's a gas turbine power plant is commonly used for peak demand. It's more expensive than the other ones, but the advantage is that it can be started with a very short ramp-up time. It can be started in a very dynamic way, and so it is used for peak periods, peak demand. So when we talk about base demand, medium demand, and peak demand, it is the traditional view on how the demand curves look like. So we have some base demand which is there all the time. Yeah, so this is here the base demand, and then there's the medium demand which is there most of the time, not during the night. And then we have the peak demand in the morning hours, at noon hours, and in the evening hours. That's the typical profile, the load profile, so-called H0 profile, which is available in different, slightly varying load curves for different seasons, for different days of a week. And this is the demand curve that is actually used in making forecasts for the energy demand for the next day, or for any day. You look at the number of households you have and just look at the H0 profiles, H0 load profiles, and then you can estimate the power demand. But nowadays it looks different from that. We know that we have power generation from renewables, and the power generation from renewables can look like that. Not that late, but similar to that. And it means that power generation from photovoltaics if you have that on your rooftop, can mean that during the day you don't consume power, or very little power, very small amount of power. And it means that the traditional demand curves of load, or base load, medium load, peak load is no longer valid. And so we have to generate new ways of actually estimating the power demand for the next days. You could say, well, the basic demand of a household stays the same. It's just the different way the power is coming from. It's coming from the rooftop and no longer from the energy provider. So you could look at it in this way, but you could also say, well, maybe that those who know that they have their own power during the day, they might shift their demand to those times of the day where they have sufficient power supply. And so the load curves are also changing. Like in the moment where people get aware of those different power availabilities, and then they move their demand to times where there is more power available. And all these standard ways of estimating or forecasting the power demand, of planning the way power plants are operated, all this is no longer valid. Yeah, this is the traditional view, and it worked fine for a long time, but all of a sudden we don't have this base load anymore at all times, like last Sunday. Maybe it was because there was Mother's Day, and so nobody was cooking in the kitchen, and so there was even less demand at that time. Yeah? So typical situation that you have negative prices, something unconceivable for a traditional system. Okay. Let me briefly show you some figures like this. This is just a table on some classical characteristics of power plants, conventional power plants. So this is brown coal power plant, this is coal power plant, like brown coal or lignite. This is gas turbine power plant. This is nuclear power plant with different sizes. So you see that the largest ones are the nuclear power plants here with 1.3 or 1.6 gigawatt peak power. The efficiency, as you can see, is quite low for most of them. There's no combined heat and power plants in this table. They are around 80% efficiency, so much better than those. So just something between 45% and 37% here for the nuclear power plants. Efficiency is not really very high. The time where they can run is like the brown coal power plants run almost all the time, 8,250 hours per year. That's almost all the hours per year running through. Coal power plants, not that much. Gas turbine, around 1,000 hours per year. You know that nowadays there are some gas turbine power plants which have been built new, and since the times where they are needed are really being reduced that much that that does no longer pay off to run them, they are dismantled immediately. And this is completely irrational because it is a much cleaner way of generating power than using brown coal, but it's too expensive. Like here you see 147 euro per megawatt hours means 14 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas from the others you are in the range of 4 or here 2 cents. This was much too low there, not realistic accounting. 5 cents, or here 4 to 5 cents, something like that. And from gas turbines, something like 15 cents per kilowatt hours. This is too expensive. But we need them. We should use them because it's a much cleaner way of generating power. In North America, they have all these new ways of getting gas. That's the fracking technology, and so they have very much gas, and they are switching in some at least in some provinces of Canada, they are switching from coal to gas almost completely. Okay. There was just some view on conventional power plants. They certainly, they are more or less flexible. Not very flexible, like nuclear power plants are not flexible, but gas turbines are very flexible. Coal power plants have some degree of flexibility. They can be adjusted to the demand. That's the old rule, generation follows demand. And then we have power generation from renewable sources, and I have told you already quite a bit about that. What are the renewable energy sources? We have solar energy, we have planetary energy, like the tides, for example. Low tide, high tide are the planetary energy sources. Geothermal energy, the heat from the kernel of the Earth is used, but as we know, meanwhile, there's, like in some areas of the Earth, this is a very strong, very large source of energy. For example, in Indonesia, they have lots of hot sources there, of heat sources in the ground. They can use that quite efficiently. Here in Germany, we could use it here in the Upper Rhine Valley to some extent, but there are a lot of problems with geothermal power plants. And so this is only a marginal technology. And except for tidal and geothermal sources, they are all based on solar energy, obviously, like wind and photovoltaics, certainly based on solar energy. Also biomass, based on solar energy, because plants grow because of getting light. Advantage is that there's a huge potential of solar energy that is available. So there is something like 3,900 times 10 to the 21 joule radiated energy. We can compare that to 0.4 10 to the 21 joule, our world primary energy consumption. So there's a huge surplus of radiation. We just have to get it, which is the problem. Yeah, but the potential is there. If we have more efficient ways of harvesting the radiated energy, then there's a very huge source. And this certainly has the major advantage that there are no carbon dioxide emissions connected with harvesting energy with your solar cells. You need some carbon dioxide, or you have some emissions when you fabricate them, and that is being reduced with the development of the technology. But when it's running, when it's harvesting energy, you have no carbon dioxide emissions. Major advantage. The disadvantage is certainly We have no constant delivery, the fluctuating character, partially highly expensive ways of doing that, and the low energy density certainly is an obstacle for economic utilization of those of this energy. And like some people, or recently I was attending a talk by one of the heads of our large utilities, and he was asked about the benefits of the energy turnaround. Not the energy turnaround, energy transition certainly. And he said, well, we have invested many billions of euros, something like 150 billion euros, in order to build photovoltaic cells, wind turbines, and so on. In particular, we invested huge amounts of money into technology for photovoltaic cells, and it does not pay off. But the advantage is that because of this investment, the price for solar cells has decreased significantly. And now it is at a level where it is actually at a price which is a market price. And nowadays, these now rather cheap photovoltaic cells can be used to build up new energy systems in areas where they don't have energy so far. In Africa, in India, in all kinds of developing countries where they have problems with building up an energy system. And because of this investment that we made, we caused the prices to really go down. And this is a benefit for those countries who need to build up access to energy. And so we did something for the world, but it's not really of immediate benefit for us, because we are investing very much there. Okay, so photovoltaic. If you look at Germany, like this is here a map of Germany where the different colors show the radiation density. And if you look at that, you immediately say that, oh, maybe that here in the south there are a few areas where it does make sense to put photovoltaic cells. Certainly not in northern Germany. These are green areas where the radiation is very low. And so like these colors indicate the radiation strength. If you look at Europe, you would say Germany is the last country where you would consider to put up photovoltaic cells, because it does not make sense. If you look at predictions how the power generation in Europe will develop in the next 10, 20 years, the predictions are that in Germany we will have a huge surplus of power just from photovoltaics, and in southern Europe they will have just marginal power generation from photovoltaics. Not because it's not a potential there, but because the political system is not actually supporting it. Yeah? It's just a different way of developing technology. And in spite of 15, 20 years ago, people said it's ridiculous to talk about having photovoltaics in, or power from photovoltaic cells in Germany. It does not make sense. And on last week when we had the nice weather, it was almost 30 gigawatt power just from photovoltaics at the peak time. Certainly not throughout, but it's a huge amount of power that we get from photovoltaic panels meanwhile. And the prediction is that, and that's not my prediction, but that of the head of one of the largest utilities here, he says that in the future we will have a surplus of power, and the major amount of power will come from photovoltaic cells in Germany. Yeah, so it's a complete shift in expert opinion about what is feasible in Germany, and this is because of the development of the technology. Okay, so what has been developed? We can convert solar light into electric power by the polysilicon materials. Efficiency is rather low, 20%. This has not changed very much over the years, but the costs of fabricating those cells have gone down. So around 12, 13 years ago, the price was at 50 cents per kilowatt hour. If you calculate the kilowatt hours that you can harvest from your cells over the lifetime of those cells. You have your investment, your initial investment, and you can calculate what you have to pay for your kilowatt hour that you get from your cell. And so it was around 50 cents per kilowatt hour about 12, 13 years ago, and now it's around 10 cents, and in a few years the predictions are that it will go down to around 5 cents per kilowatt hour. That is in the same level as what I just showed you before about the costs of conventional power plants, like from coal and so on, 5 cents per kilowatt hour, around 5 cents. And photovoltaics is predicted to be at that level within a few years from now. Yeah, it was reduced from 50 cents to 10 cents already, and it will go down even further. Okay. Certainly in Southern Europe and in North Africa, the harvest will be much higher from the same cells, and so there the cost would be even lower. So it really makes sense to use photovoltaic cells in those countries. And then there are different approaches, as for example using solar heat, concentrated solar power. There you have mirrors, like indicate, I don't know whether you can see that. Here you have also some explanation for that. You have here some mirrors, and these mirrors reflect the sunshine or the radiation of the sun, and then it's concentrated on those tubes here. Like they are all reflecting the sunshine on those tubes. They are heated up, and then you get hot water, you get steam in those tubes, and then this heat can be used to actually drive turbines again and generate electricity. Completely different way of generating power directly from the sun. It can also be done like indicated on this picture. Here you have a number of mirrors, and they all reflect the sun into one central place there on this tower, and there everything is heated up. You get very hot, very high temperatures, and these high temperatures can be used then again to generate electricity. So this is concentrating solar power to get very hot, or to generate heat. There are special materials which can actually store the heat in a very good way, and then you can convert that into electric power. The major advantage certainly is that it is a much smoother way of generating electricity from solar radiation, because in the photovoltaic panel, if you have a cloud over hiding the sun, you have an immediate drop in power generation. If you have this kind of device, it will not be heated up that much for a moment, but this does not result in such a drastic fluctuation of the power generation. So this has quite a few advantages, and there are like in South Africa and also in Spain, there are some pilot installations of those types of solar power or concentrated solar power plants. So more stable power generation, and the degree of radiation here has to be quite high, so it does not make sense in Germany, only in the southern areas near to the equator. There it's really very efficient way of doing that. Prices are supposed to be quite low. These figures are not very reliable, because this is technology which is quite under development. And I mentioned here the project Desertec. I guess you have all heard about the project Desertec, which was set up a few years, I think already 5, 6, 8 years ago, where the idea was to install solar power plants in northern Africa, and in this way generate power to industrialize northern Africa, and take 15% of the power and move that to Europe. And for that, there would have been massive investments into transmission cables would have been necessary, and certainly a major requirement would have been to have stable political situations there in Northern Africa, and we all know that this is not the case. So all the companies that initially formed the Desertec consortium meanwhile dropped out. And it is an interesting technological investment, where the main purpose was to provide power for Northern Africa. And it certainly would be reasonable to do that, because then if you have a good industry there, you have labor for the people that won't be driven to Europe to get a way of living. Let me briefly go back to photovoltaic, just to tell you another anecdote. I talked to the owner of one company here. Their business is to install solar power plants or solar cells, and they talk to people in South Africa and talk to people that they should cover the roof with solar cells. Some wealthy people said, no, we don't take poor man's power. We can afford power that is coming from diesel. Because poor man's power is power from solar cells. Because solar cells are put on the rooftops of the areas where the low-income people live. These are government programs, very reasonable. And then those who have more money say, oh, I don't need poor man's power. I can afford to pay for diesel to get my power generated. Yeah? Completely different attitude, and they were very surprised to hear that in Europe, wealthy people are glad to have solar panels on the rooftop. So this just shows how difficult it is to introduce a certain technology in a country. You always have to look at the cultural backgrounds of the people. Okay. This was solar heat. Then we come, just to show you again this slide here on German power generation. You have seen that already, a lot of power generation at the noon times, and here again the problems that sometimes we have solar power, sometimes we don't. Actually, I don't know why I had those two slides here. I had shown them to you before. So wind power is the next part that is of interest. We have all kinds of wind power plants, meanwhile, onshore and offshore. And this diagram down there is showing the curve, like the power generation curve. Like here we have the wind speed, and there we have the power that is generated. And you see that here is a region where like it's a rather small change in the wind, and here you have quite a large change in the power that is generated. And this is in an area where you have something like wind speed 3 to 4 or 5 to 6 meters per second. And there you have quite some fluctuations in wind speed. And it means that you have quite some fluctuations in power generation from wind. Because it is this area where it is just a very steep slope here. And small changes in the wind result in dramatic changes in the power that is generated, and so we have this very fluctuating character of power generation from wind. One could try to compensate that by using large batteries. In some countries, they are always building a large battery pack beside of those wind power plants, and then they can provide stable power from the battery pack. But this is extra investment, makes the power more expensive. Problems are that they disturb the landscape. You know, there are all kinds of objections of people who don't like to have wind power plants in their backyard. They all are very fond of having wind power plants in principle, but there is this NIMBY attitude, which is an abbreviation for not in my own backyard, or not in my backyard. Yeah, it should be there, certainly, but it should not disturb the nice landscape that I have. It's high land usage. Certainly, if you want to put these plants somewhere, you cannot put them very densely. They need to be placed such that they don't take the wind from each other. And so the placement of wind power plants is an interesting optimization problem to do that such that they get optimum efficiency from the wind that is available. And so there is quite a high land usage, very volatile supply, and so we have these problems. Currently installed more than 35 gigawatt peak capacity. It will go up quite significantly furthermore. It will be something like 60 or 70 gigawatt in the future. And we know that we have, I don't know whether I have it here. Yes, there are differences between offshore and onshore installations. So if you look at the power generation statistics, we have some power generation from offshore wind farms. Most of the power generation is coming from onshore wind. And certainly an advantage of the offshore wind plants is that they have more stable wind. And there is a significant advantage for the energy industry because the power system, the power grid, does not have to change if you have a central wind farm somewhere. It's just replacing the central conventional power plant in principle, but the whole structure of the power grid is not affected. Whereas an onshore wind power plant is connected to a medium voltage layer of the network, and so this is a significant change of the system. In particular, the onshore wind power plants belong to all kinds of different people and not just to one company. And the large industry is always fond of having only a few large industries controlling everything. They don't like that the number of power plants that we had in Germany used to be something like around 1,000 power plants. Now it's around 1.5 million power plants in Germany. And certainly a huge multitude of different owners. And now you have the task to provide stable power generation from that many power plants. So we're making our life very complex. And it's not such that the utilities rejoice about all these nice new power generators, because they have not control over those power generators. Okay, then there's biomass. Also, for quite some long time, biomass has been used. It's organic material storing solar energy. Photosynthesis is a very effective way of actually getting energy from the sun, and it is stored in biomass. And we can get it out again by transforming the energy in some way, by burning wooden pellets. So energy conversion by combustion. And then there are fluid carriers of bioenergy. There is rapeseed oil, so we have the biodiesel. We have the E10, there's 10% bio or rapeseed oil in the gasoline. And then there are attempts to just in some way transform biomass to liquid, to actually high or liquid which is of high quality. And I will show you that in a moment. The BioLiq plant is one of the major showcases here of the Campus North KIT energy systems. Then there are gaseous carriers of bioenergy. So you can have fermentation of biological waste. This is done in all the biogas facilities. Many farmers have become power generators by building large devices for biogas. So in 2012 there were around 7,500 biogas plants in Germany, capacity of 3.4 gigawatt, and quite a bit of the land is used now for growing the biomass that is needed for the biogas devices. So this is also some trade-off. What do you use the land for? For food or for energy? This has to be decided. So there is high potential for decentralized, stable generation of power and heat from these biogas facilities, because you can generate gas there, you can store the gas or generate electricity from the gas. And this can be done in a very flexible way. So this is a very adaptive way of generating electricity. And so this is not adding to the fluctuating character of energy from renewables, but this is a way we can actually even out those changes by using the biogas plants in a reasonable way. The only problem is that currently the biogas plants are paid for continuous generation of electricity. And if they don't generate electricity, they are not paid. And so there's no incentive to behave in a reasonable way and store energy or generate energy depending on the current situation of the system. So negative effects are certainly the rising prices for agricultural land. The land prices have more than doubled because of that development. And there is the danger of monoculture. More corn is grown instead of other crops. Okay. It's 3:30, so I think we just make a break now and reconvene in 15 minutes. Okay, thank you for your attention.